Say what you like about the blowouts, the format, the teams sending second 15s. 2024-25 might just be remembered as the season that put the magic back into the Champions Cup. Saturday's clash in Cardiff might have been the most anticipated tournament has seen for some years. The holy trinity of Leinster, La Rochelle and Toulouse not just broken up but obliterated, shut out by two brilliant, breathtaking teams hell-bent on running the ball, on entertaining a crowd. The stylish, slick Northampton Saints took on the ramshackle rascals of Bordeaux-Bègles in a match that promised to be a blinder whatever way you looked at it. And whilst a free-scoring, open-ended first half morphed into something more cagey and tactical in the second, it's hard to argue European rugby's great revolution didn't reinvigorate the tournament. For Union Bordeaux-Begles now stand as the best team in Europe. Champions, a star forever adorned upon their jersey. So how did Yannick Bru's bullshit artist pull it off? What did Northampton get wrong, if anything? How couldn't they pull it off themselves? And could this be the start of two potential new dynasties who'll be contesting final after final themselves down the years? Northampton Saints might have fallen just short, but they began the game with one of the best opening 100 or so seconds of rugby you'll ever see. Finn Smith's kickoff here is so lackadaisical. He shapes to send it long, then instead goes for a tiny chip. He wants us hitting the ground as quickly as possible, trying to create some confusion, landing it almost exactly equidistant between three pods covering the ground. It works perfectly. All three go for the ball, two getting in each other's way, and it's spilling the ball for Iogan to drop on. Saints then play this passage at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's legit maybe the fastest rugby I've ever seen from them, taking their usual play to test intensity in a split second. The first three phases are all off 9, all through Alex Mitchell. It's pretty classic Northampton Saints rugby, back and forth, targeting the same defenders over and over again, time and time again, trying to get them to make tackles. 5 Bordeaux players here have to make their second tackle of the game before the clock hits 30 seconds, and it starts to have a knock-on effect on their defensive line. Lucu is one of those players just back up to his feet, and Moafana is forced to here on the short side because Saints are going back and forth so regularly, so probably be needed in a few moments' time. With so many scrambling back and forth to their feet, Bordeaux congests their defence in order to help the likes of Lamoff out, and Adam Coleman here overreads the play. He thinks they're going to continue doing the same thing and shoots in. This, instead, is a great call by Finn Smith to go at the back, catching them off guard after repeated phases from 9, now playing off 10. He just slides outside Coleman, forcing Petty to commit, and with Moafana out on the other wing, Deporter is now alone in these wide channels. Saints' regular reliance on attacking kicks in the semi-final and other games throughout the season has forced Bordeaux to drop 2 into the backfield to cover this, and Jalabert hence is rushing into position last minute, with BLBRA hedging his bets between the numerous attacking options around, and it allows Furbank to throw over the top to Hutchinson on the extreme. Mitchell is in there immediately, and Bordeaux once again honeypot to cover the ruck. Lamoff, Petty and Lucu here, all three guys on the other side of the pitch, mere seconds earlier, yet Mitchell barely looks up. He just flings it, no time to think, and then again, repeatedly just looking to get outside the big groups of forwards coming in around the ruck. Jalabert shoots offside a moment later, and Mitchell taking a quick tap is a proper statement of intent. They want to play quick, they want to go for tries. Lucu probably goes to bin for this if the try isn't scored, but Saints don't worry about that. They don't get thrown off by that. They don't even look to complain at all. Nor do they worry about the fact that the tertiary Wallace or Gromit character they play at scrum half is off his feet. The game plan remains the same, forwards hitting lines out wide from the ruck. This both allows you to get into a weaker seam, Dingwall here making a great carry because he's able to hit the outside of a defender looking inwards, and also forces these forwards to cover more ground or to get onto the open side and get into position. They've got to fold further, run further to get there. They're barely into position as Smith carries himself here, and reaching the far side of that ruck means they're now scrambling the wrong way when Mitchell reverses gear and hits Langdon on the short side. He snipes himself then a moment later after Langdon gets close, and the Bordeaux forwards now so thoroughly spread from the back and forth approach that he can essentially take out the last guys. Freeman plays 9 and pops it to Coles, who has just backs before him. He gets onto Moafana's weak shoulder, and with only a winger coming in to assist, can ride the tackle and score the try, kickstarting a pretty unbelievable all-court, all-match performance from a man playing without a knee. One then capped off by a second try to top and tail the first half, scoring in the last play once again. This is an utterly brilliant two-phase move, right? Northampton play a shortened 4-man line-out here, meaning that 3 of their forwards, the Hooker also throwing in, are in midfield on Dingwall's shoulder here to smash it up. Finn Smith, the general beacon for wherever Saints are going to play, and Bordeaux will know this, they'll know they usually follow where Finn Smith is. He floods to the open side, and all 5 forwards from the line-out look to be following him. Bordeaux's big lads hence do the same, folding on the open side, following Smith, following their opposite numbers. However, Coles and Kemeny stop just short. They're initially running that way, then they just pause and wait on this side. About the same moment, the ball is now playable for Mitchell. This catches Bordeaux off guard. The plasticine menace hitting the outside man and looping himself, becoming the fly half because Smith was such a critical part of their open side bluff. The entire forward pack is now engaged and out the game. Saints forcing them to overwork, allowing Mitchell to fix the two lingering backs. Penno is then committed and Dingwall rides the contact with Lucu and throws a lovely offload to put Slight home almost clear. This is an utterly brilliant tackle by Retier, but Alex Cole's line is superb, flooding through just in case from the moment the ball gets wide, the moment the ball gets outside him. With the 9 being used as the 10, Vesti assigned the scrum half role instead to a flanker. It's an absolutely brilliant and subtle bit of play, making sure every role is covered, even when you're taking one out of the play to use as a decoy. And it sums up how Saints play so well. It's bold, it's brilliant, but most importantly, it's so cleanly thought out and intelligent. Something we also saw in their wider game plan and how they look to limit Bordeaux. All season, Bordeaux-Bègles have been utterly irresistible to watch. The giddy trio of Jalibert, Penno and BLBRA, responsible for more scores than Jesse James whittling. Their game plan is built on creating broken field scenarios, be it by kicking to open counter-attacking opportunities, targeting breakdown turnovers so they can play against a defence still finding shape, or their most simple trick, Union Bordeaux-Begles play to width more often than any other team in the top 14 and wide to wide from one touchline to the other, more than any other side in Europe. They want to stretch a defence. In contrast to the rugby league style ideas Northampton, and so many other teams at the minute, adopt of targeting some defenders again and again and again to get easier carries, slower line speed and softer tackles, Bordeaux want to stretch you, to confuse you. The threat Bordeaux pose is unique, and hence Saints' duo of archangels, Phil Dowson and Sam Vesti, devised a really smart means of keeping the UBB boys quiet. Just as they did against Leinster, Northampton slightly adapted their usual kicking game, broadly looking for 2 types of kick, depending on how the opposition backfield is set up, but with the same goal. Roman Burras, Louis Bielbiere and Damien Penno have probably become the most dangerous back three on the counter-attack in all of club rugby. Apologies to the Rosser brothers and Angus O'Brien. With Monsieur Le Beep Beep in particular becoming probably the most dangerous winger in all of world rugby. Apologies to the Rosser brothers once again. So instead of the traditional, don't kick it to the danger man, just don't kick it to the really dangerous guy, why would you do that? Tactic that most teams would deploy going back throughout the entire history of rugby union when they see that familiar red scrum cap in the backfield. Saints did the opposite. To kick to someone else is simply to give Beep Beep more time to assess the chasing defensive line and pick his moment, pick his targets, identify a prop or a lock being isolated and run at them. Instead, Saints targeted him, making him put his eyes up in the air, always be looking, be the one catching the ball so we can't look at the defensive line. Hanging kicks down his wing, a few contestable against Tommy Freeman, a tactic I think they probably would have lent on more had their earlier injuries not led to him spending most of the game at fullback, but an awful lot just like this. Regularly deploying Alex Mitchell in the backfield because he's simply got the best and biggest and most accurate boot in the team, it allowed them a huge edge in kick battles from the first strike. From this kickoff, Mitchell hits it right long to BLBRA, but Beep Beep is positioned so deep that when he regathers the ball, there's nobody for him to pass to, and in case he tries to run it, Saints have both flankers in hot pursuit here to challenge the breakdown, potentially nicking a turnover. Instead, UBB's LBB is left no choice but to put the ball in the air, and he slices it. Out in the full, a full 50-metre net gain for Northampton Saints. Or off this poor chip by Jalibert, Northampton immediately give it to their plasticine playmaker. Not worried about Beep Beep's about town, Mitchell thumps it long, once again leaving the star boy in position where he has no choice but to kick. Once again, he slices it, and it's about a 50-metre net gain, probably about 47 here. Northampton didn't mind BLBRA having the ball, because despite his penchant for doing this, he is the weakest kicker in the Bordeaux backline, so they look to put him in situations where he'll be forced to thump it back time and time again. They look to put him in situations where he'll be forced to kick. Running wasn't an option, and when he, out of frustration, tried to run this one back, he ended up isolated and turned over almost immediately because of that flanker following up I mentioned. It effectively took one of the most dangerous players in the world out of the game, and also worked as part of a wider tactic. By targeting the touchlines, primarily kicking to width, they put even Bordeaux's best strikers of the ball into awkward positions where they could do nothing but hit it back Saintward. Retier here ends up just isolated. He has nothing he can do and ends up kicking the ball dead because he sort of has no options other than to put it long, and he puts it too long. Bordeaux-Bègles were just left devoid of counter-attacking opportunities and hence forced to rely on their own kicking game in order to get on top. The French's opening try, scored by professional that prick Damien Penaud, is a perfect example of the tactic they ran all day to counter and open up what Saints were doing to them. Sending the kickoff long, Northampton then clear into touch and Bordeaux run an absolutely brilliant, lovely move. This dummy maul engages the forwards, yet they break off and Lucu delivers a really flat seat. His body language is outstanding. It's unclear until the last possible second if he's hitting Moefana or Deporter, and it forces the full Saints midfield here to rush on him, honeypotting, then stop still as Deporter throws it out the back. Jalibert has started wide and wrapped around late, pulling both Freeman up flat and Furbank now coming into the line. The 10's eyes are always on the lieutenant and he drops it onto the toe, with the full Bordeaux back free in pursuit. Under so much pressure, Furbank is forced to take the ball into touch and give Bordeaux an attacking line-out. After one failed attempt and a long stoppage, Bordeaux then play their typical incredibly intelligent wide rugby. The maul comes to a halt, and whilst Northampton's forwards do manage to fan out a tad, they're all within 5 metres or so of the ruck, and with one wide pass, Lucu can take them out the game and send Moefana right into Finn Smith. 3 players, including winger Slightholme, come in to help out their 10, and it leaves the 2 centres forced to cover Poirot here, playing the back row role. Samu's line holds them for just a split second, but it's an important second, and it allows Jalibert to get onto the outside. So many numbers now sucked in, putting Burros into space. Freeman has to make a decision, and whilst it's the right one, there's not much he can do. He commits, Burros gives it, the fullback freeing Penaud, who scores in the corner. Bordeaux's carries are so rarely random, they're calculated to take maximum defenders out of the game, and it allows Jalibert to pull the strings, just as he did in that initial kick, that sort of form the backbone of their overall tactic. It's easy to lose track of how many times Matthew Jalibert tried little chips like this, but it was part of a larger whole. As you can see on the wider angle here, Saints' typical backfield looks a bit like this. Alec Mitchell or Finn Smith covering one wing, the fullback on the other, and if the opposition get the ball wide, they rush up to come in and cut it off, with the winger generally just behind the main line, able to drop back and cover if one of those players is off their feet or out of the game, but broadly, they want them defending as part of a general main line. Bordeaux manipulated this beautifully, both by one, dinking it into the dead zone behind the defensive line here, over and over again, knowing that there was an area that if they can get Northampton to play a little bit of line speed, they won't be able to cover in time, and also for a huge array of rolling stabs looking to apply pressure time after time. This is a perfect example. Bordeaux overload the blindside here. 11 of their 15 players within a dozen or so meters, and this soft play out the back to Jalibert is deliberately slow, giving Mitchell more time to come into the main line, to shoot up, so that when Jalibert stabs it through, Ardman Alex is under enormous pressure. He does brilliantly well, but Freeman is left no angle and no time. He does really well on this occasion, sticking to the game plan trying to isolate Beep Beep, but it gifts Bordeaux a much stronger attacking opportunity. With Freeman focused on the Red Menace, there's little cover on the wing, with just the flankers filling out, and allows Jalibert to target and isolate Litchfield, slipping it brilliant to Deporter, who makes the break. Bordeaux now massively in net gain territory, and while Saints do win the ball back shortly afterwards, a turnover not long after that in turn nets them 3 points, all from one really smart kick by Matthew Jalibert. They applied such pressure, consistently forcing bouncing balls. This from BLBRA creates a 5-metre line-up from which they ultimately scored their second try, a bouncing ball creating enough of a broken field as they want for Jalibert to do his usual nonsense and create a try in the corner, or Lucu here catches Smith having worked in field just in case and stabs a really low scuddering kick along the grass. Regardless of whether you think this goes forwards or backwards, it's so difficult to field and ultimately does win Bordeaux a significant field position from which they run in the disallowed Beep Beep try, which is another really lovely move, just getting him coming out the back, hitting space, looking to commit defenders and free at Penaud. Bordeaux are known for their running game, but this match was won by their kicking, by the way they managed to apply pressure. The first half in particular, very little of the match was played in the middle of the pitch, most of it taking place in the 222s, particularly in Northampton's, as Bordeaux applied pressure after pressure after pressure through booting the ball incredibly smartly to allow them opportunities to try and open up. They weren't overawed by the occasion of the final, but rather tweaked their game plan to allow them greater control of the game. It's frankly a shame that Maxime Lucu's eventual obituary is probably just going to read not Antoine Dupont, maybe with a comma than the word bald, because over the last few years he's turned into a properly spectacularly tidy rugbyman, and on Saturday he was almost undoubtedly the best player on the pitch as he kept Bordeaux in control of the match all game. long. When discussing the most effective halfback combos, you tend to think of guys like Dupont and Undermack, or indeed Mitchell and Smith, who were always on the same wavelength, thinking the same way, doing the same things, knowing what each other are going to do, having the same philosophy and approach to the game. And yet Bordeaux's pairing of Jalibert and Lucu seems to work because it's exactly the opposite of that. The two are corded together, but continually stretching that elastic, pulling the team in different directions, yet because they're so attached, landing Bordeaux exactly where it needs to be as they try and tug of war it to their side. It's an oversimplification of two players with much more rounder games. They're much better than this, but so often it feels like the maverick Jalibert is guiding them towards playing full jouet, whilst Lucu, who didn't leave the Pro Day dirt until he was 27, is wanting to play a much more structured, conservative game. And whilst the first 60 gave us their usual glorious balance, Jalibert creating and delivering beautifully, and also kicking incredibly well, the last 20, Bordeaux cut the cord and just let themselves have the rare treat of going full team Lucu. At times, it felt like Jalibert might as well have clocked out of work, such was Lucu's grip on the game. This is a proper shithouse Pro Day dirt kick. The way, instead of clearing long, he targets a dead zone behind the Saints' defence, a la Jalibert with the chip so many times, low, just looking to get a bounce, knowing it could then go anywhere. And indeed, it kind of does. Litchfield ending up narrowly beating Monsieur Le Beep Beep to the ball, but even once Mitchell kicks it clear, Lucu then plays one phase to get a better angle, and hangs it right on the scrum half again, who's dropped into the backfield. Penno is both taller and much better in the air, and worst case scenario, Mitchell calls the mark and has no angle to work with, likely giving Bordeaux a line out around the same spot they're currently at that Luke is kicking from, but with 1 minute now eaten off the clock. And then a few minutes later, once Saints do clear long, eventually, Lucu does exactly the same thing again, once again targeting Mitchell. It's not an identical kick, an identical situation, but this time Ardman Alex concedes the penalty for taking Penno out in the air. Yes, I'm going to keep calling Ardman Alex. I've decided that as I'm recording that wasn't in the script. The sheer effort this defensive set takes out of Saints is enormous, but Lucu's real opponent isn't Northampton Saints, it's the clock. This kick is hung on 71 minutes and 18 seconds, and Saints don't get the ball back into an attacking position, knowing they have to score twice, until almost exactly 3 minutes later, until they're looking and going, okay, we'll have to score twice in 5 minutes. And Bordeaux can run this defensive set like it would decide the game, because in many ways it likely will. Petty makes a brilliant tiny read, not folding, just remaining out wide so he can keep in shape in case Smith flashes blindside, which he does, and he cuts off the options. Retier then later going for some great line speed to knock the shape out of Saints. Slight home, eventually forced into a desperation kick, deflected into touch, taking another 40 seconds off the clock. And then the line out is thrown not straight. And at this point, the game is almost good as done. Lucu was just exceptional on Saturday, and his game management in the final quarter, world class. The quality of his kicking, always outstanding. Just looking to trap Northampton in tricky positions to play the game on his terms, not even Bordeaux's, his. Leaving Saints pretty much scrambling for a foothold that entire second half. So much of Northampton, just as in 2011, not scoring a point in the entire second half of a Champions Cup final, was down to Lucu. This wasn't helped by Finn and Co going away from the small pressure kicking game that got them into the final, the kind of thing Bordeaux were doing brilliantly, and where Bordeaux responded to Northampton's kicking game by pressing long from their own half and short from the opposition. Northampton didn't really change theirs when they saw what Bordeaux were doing. In real terms, right, Northampton kicked about a third as much of their possession on Saturday as they did against Leinster. That's a fundamentally different team. Whilst their kicking game plan out of their own half remained smart and accurate and excellent, as we discussed earlier, Saints slowed up almost entirely on booting the ball in the opposition half, kicking just 8 times whilst in Bordeaux's territory. 3 of these were attacking grubbers to chase, including this extremely smart chance that Henry Pollock almost scored off, if not from being, a yard offside. We then had 2 rollers from Alex Mitchell in successive possessions, clearly a note given on the field that we need to start doing this. They did it for literally about 3 minutes and then stopped again, and then 1 cross kick in the final play, leaving just 1 actual pressure territory kick, the sort Bordeaux fed them all day, the sort that led to 3 of Bordeaux's 4 tries and their 2 penalties. But more pressingly, the sort of jab that they landed against Leinster for 80 straight minutes, particularly that final quarter when they shithouse kicked their way to victory. It led to Northampton almost exclusively trying to play from halfway in that second period, scarcely generating a legit chance in the final 40, always trying to force too much. This was a game between 2 teams with exceptional attacks, so it was always going to be decided by which team did the most in the other areas of the game, and you can't really argue that that team wasn't Union Bordeaux-Begles. Their kicking game was excellent, their pack attack enormous, and there were some outstanding passages of defence. They feel less notable because they're not 30-phase goal line stands, but this late effort is brilliant. Gazzotti and Jalibert both read this move before Northampton have run it and hold Dingwall up, forcing the offload, and Saints then with Mitchell try to play before they're ready, before they're set. Langdon still finding shape and hence not there, not in position to take the pass, knocking it on, giving the game to Bordeaux. Saturday was an excellent finale that gave everybody who follows the Champions Cup what the tournament had been needing for so long. A new champion who celebrated like this when the final whistle came. And in Lucu's case, even before that. It was the match, the occasion we've been waiting for. Northampton may not have won, but they more than played their part in this year's championship. In the late 90s and noughties, it was the entirely feasible goal of virtually every team in Europe to win the Heineken Cup. For some, it was this season's aim. For others, it was what we're looking to do in 5 years' time. But everyone dreamed. Having a good run, reaching the quarters or semis was an achievement in itself, as your boys gave their fan base an excuse to dream of rugby's biggest prize for an extra few weeks. It felt like the pinnacle of your entire season, of the entire club. However, over the last 15 years, the fantasy has slowly faded away. Only Exeter have been able to break up the 5 dynasties, who've won 15 of the last 16 titles. The thought of adding a star to the jersey growing impossible for all but a tiny group of clubs at any given time. The last 5 finals, indeed, were contested by just 3 clubs in various combinations, as hope dwindled and competition narrowed to basically a brilliant but inevitable final. Everything else just prolonged build-up for Leinster playing Toulouse, Toulouse playing La Rochelle, or La Rochelle playing Leinster. When we last had a team, other than those 3, in the Champions Cup final, Northampton Saints and Union Bordeaux-Begles were both sitting bottom end of the table, having been involved at various points in the season in a relegation battle. And yet, 5 years later, they've rejuvenated the entire competition together. This was a joint effort. Northampton may not have won, but they played their part. A European adventure is suddenly possible again. Clubs can hope and dream of one day conquering the whole lot. Union Bordeaux-Begles' first star may be remembered for the things that Jalibert, Penno and BLBRA did along the way, establishing themselves as the most fun to watch unit in all of club rugby. Sorry, Rosser brothers, but this finals legacy is much greater than that. It's one of 2 teams who ask the question we've heard so many times coming from the Saints camp these last few weeks. Why not us? And in doing so, showed every club and every fan outside Dublin and 2 tiny pockets of France, dreaming is worth doing. Say what you like about the travel, the round 16, the scheduling. Thanks to these 2 clubs, 24-25 will forever be the season to put the magic back into the Champions Cup.
Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That was indeed rugby. That's Champions Cup final. The European season is good as done. We're going to have a little look at the domestic leagues, but really we're going into a bunch of stuff with the international season and the Lions season coming up very soon.
So we've got Australia, that's one big one that we're going to look at. We're going to look at American things, we have that just around the corner, and a few other exciting little bits here and there.
We are going to look at Sasha Feinberg and Goma Zulu next week. We also probably have a video coming out second half of this week as well on a trend that's occurred over the course of this domestic and international season.
And here's a clue.
We'll see you then for that, and indeed more
rugby.
First of all, I think tonight we drink beer, and after we think about the top 14, but